Toxic people do not choose their targets randomly. Marcus Aurelius noticed this and documented it. They look for something specific, and when they find it, they move toward it with the precision of someone who has done this before. What they look for is not weakness. It is something most people consider a strength. Marcus Aurelius called it the quality that toxic people cannot tolerate in others, because it reminds them of everything they have refused to become. And the moment they identify it in you, you become a target, not because you are weak, because you're something they cannot be. What that quality is, and the precise response Marcus Aurelius built for the moment it happens, is what this video is about. And it changes everything about how you understand who targets you and why. Before we go in, this week we covered Seneca on anger, Epictetus on freedom. Today, Marcus Aurelius on the most specific thread available. Subscribe now and hit the bell, because what we are building, problem by problem, philosopher by philosopher, is a complete system for navigating what most people never understand about the people around them. Subscribe. 5 seconds. Now, what Marcus Aurelius found. Welcome to Memento Sapiens, ancient wisdom for the modern mind. Marcus Aurelius spent 20 years governing the most complex social environment available in the ancient world, the Roman imperial court, a place where manipulation was currency, where alliances shifted daily, where people with power used it, and people without power found other ways to take yours. He was surrounded every day by people operating from fear, from ego, from insecurity disguised as confidence, and he watched them with the precision of someone who had to understand human behavior, not as a philosophical exercise, but as a survival requirement. What he wrote in the Meditations about people, about how they operate, what drives them, why they target certain others, is not theory. It is field observation from a man who had more data points on human behavior under pressure than almost anyone who ever lived. Today, I am giving you his complete system on toxic people, specifically who they target, why they target them, and the precise response that removes you from their reach permanently. Part 1. Why toxic people choose specific targets and what they are actually looking for. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in the Meditations that most people read as general philosophy, but is actually a precise observation about a very specific dynamic. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, envious, and unsociable." Most people read this as a warning to expect difficulty from everyone. It is not. It is a classification. Marcus Aurelius is describing a specific type of person, not all people, and why they behave the way they do. He continues, "They're like this because they cannot tell the difference between good and evil." That phrase, "cannot tell the difference," is the key. Toxic behavior in a Marcus Aurelius framework is not malice. It is confusion. The person who operates toxically is someone who has organized their entire life around things that do not actually produce what they are seeking: external power instead of internal strength, control over others instead of self-governance, appearances instead of character. And they have done this for long enough that they cannot see any alternative. Now, why do they choose specific targets? Marcus Aurelius observed that toxic behavior is not random. It concentrates on people who have what the toxic person cannot access in themselves. Specifically, people who are genuinely calm under pressure, honest when dishonesty would be easier, settled in their identity regardless of validation, capable of real presence without performance. In other words, people who are quiet, not passive, not weak, Not easy targets, quiet in the specific sense of not needing to perform, not needing to dominate, not needing external proof of their worth. That quality, the absence of noise, is precisely what toxic people cannot tolerate, because it holds up a mirror, and what they see in the mirror is the distance between who they perform themselves to be and who they actually are. Part 2. The 5 types Marcus Aurelius identified. Their mechanism and why each targets quiet people differently. Marcus Aurelius did not use modern psychological terminology, but across the Meditations, his observations about specific human types map precisely onto what we now call toxic behavior patterns. 5 types, 5 mechanisms. Type 1, the power performer. The person whose entire identity is built on dominating social situations. They talk loudest, claim most, dismiss others systematically. They target quiet people specifically because a quiet person's presence challenges the performance without saying a word. You do not have to argue with them. Your stillness is the argument, and they cannot tolerate it. Type 2, the victim architect. The person who constructs narratives, where they're always wronged, always overlooked, always treated unfairly. They target quiet people because quiet people make good audiences until the quiet person stops playing that role, at which point the quiet person becomes the villain in the next narrative. Type 3, the approval extractor. The person who needs constant validation and has organized their relationships around extracting it. They target genuinely settled people because a settled person's approval feels like it means something, unlike approval from people who get freely. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this type. People who need to be seen, to believe they exist. Type 4, the chaos architect. The person who feels most alive in the presence of emotional volatility. When everything is calm, they are anxious. When everything is unstable, they are energized. They target quiet people because quiet people represent the stability they cannot achieve and cannot stand to see someone else have. Type 5, the conditional ally. The most dangerous type. The person who appears supportive, who seems genuinely invested in you until they need something, at which point the relationship reveals its actual architecture. Everything they did was an investment, and now they are collecting. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this type more carefully than the others, because proximity to power made conditional allies his most immediate threat. Part 3. Why the responses most people try make the situation worse, and what Marcus Aurelius said instead. When a quiet person encounters a toxic person, they typically try one of 3 responses. Response 1, explanation. They try to explain themselves, to clarify the misunderstanding, to demonstrate that the toxic person's narrative about them is wrong. Marcus Aurelius would say this is a mistake, not because the explanation is wrong, because explanation gives the toxic person exactly what they are seeking: engagement, energy, proof that they have reached you. The moment you explain yourself to someone who is not asking in good faith, you have confirmed that they have power over your need to be understood. Response 2, distance. They try to physically or socially remove themselves. This works sometimes, but Marcus Aurelius identified a problem. Pure avoidance without internal resolution means the toxic dynamic simply transfers to the next similar person, because what made you a target was not that specific person, it was the quality in you they identified as reachable, until that quality is understood and protected. The next version of the same type will find the same opening. Response 3, counterattack. They respond with the same energy, matching aggression with aggression, matching manipulation with manipulation, fighting on the toxic person's terrain. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this directly. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, not as moral advice, as strategic observation. The person who fights on the terrain of the person who designed that terrain will lose, not because they are weaker, because the terrain was built to give its designer the advantage. So what does Marcus Aurelius recommend instead? We are at the exact moment where the system changes everything. If this is landing, if you recognized anyone in those 5 types, if you recognize yourself in those 3 responses, subscribe right now. Hit the bell, because what Marcus Aurelius built as the precise alternative, the response that removes you from the target position permanently, is what comes next, and it is different from anything you have been told about dealing with toxic people. Subscribe. 10 seconds. Then, the precise response. Part 4. Marcus Aurelius's precise response system. The 4 steps that remove you from the target position. Step 1. Reclassify the behavior. Not they're doing this to me. They're doing this. The shift from the first to the second is the entire foundation of the Marcus Aurelius response. When you say they're doing this to me, you have accepted the frame that you are the subject, that their behavior is about you, that your worth is implicated. When you say they're doing this, you have reclassified it as information about them. What kind of person behaves this way? What do they need that makes this behavior available to them? What fear or wound is operating here? This reclassification does not excuse the behavior. It removes you from the center of it, and a person who is not in the center cannot be destabilized by the blast radius. Step 2. Protect the quiet. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The quiet that toxic people target, the settled quality, the absence of performance, must be actively maintained, not passively hoped for. This means daily practice of the gap, daily account of what is yours and what is not, daily reaffirmation of the values that produce the quiet, because the quiet is not a personality trait. It is a practice, and practices require maintenance. Step 3. Respond from values, not reaction. When engagement is necessary, and sometimes it is, Marcus Aurelius prescribed one filter. Does this response reflect the person I have decided to be? Not does this response win? Not does this response teach them a lesson? Does it reflect who I am? Because the person who responds from their values in every interaction, including the difficult ones, cannot be pulled into the toxic person's terrain. They are already standing on different ground. Step 4. Maintain compassion without access. This is the step Marcus Aurelius returned to more consistently than any other in the Meditations. He wrote repeatedly about the people who operated toxically in his court and consistently arrived at the same conclusion. These people are like this because they cannot see an alternative, not because they are evil, because they are lost. And the person who understands that, who can hold genuine compassion for someone they have also decided not to give access to, is free in a way that pure avoidance never achieves. Compassion without access, not coldness, not hatred, not dramatic severance, the specific warmth of someone who wishes another person well from a measured distance. Part 5. How Marcus Aurelius applied this system in the most toxic social environment available. The Roman imperial court. The Roman imperial court was not a benign institution. It was a place where power was the only currency, appearances were everything, and manipulation was the primary language. Marcus Aurelius governed it for 20 years, and he wrote the Meditations, partly as a daily practice for maintaining the inner citadel while surrounded by exactly the types we just described, the power performers who needed to dominate every interaction with the emperor, the victim architects who constructed elaborate narratives to gain imperial favor, the conditional allies who supported him, precisely as long as his power served their interests. He did not remove himself from them. He could not. He reclassified them daily in writing, returning again and again to the observation that they behaved this way, not from malice, but from blindness. He protected his quiet through the morning practice, the Stoic philosophy, the daily return to values, so that the noise of the court never became the noise inside him. He responded from values, making decisions based on what the situation required and who he intended to be, not on what would satisfy the immediate social pressure. And he maintained compassion without access, the specifically Stoic warmth of someone who sees the confusion in another person's behavior without needing to fix it or be destroyed by it. The meditations were written in this context, not as abstract philosophy, as the daily maintenance manual for a man surrounded by exactly the types of people this video describes. That is why the system works in your life. Not because your circumstances are like his, because human behavior, in the imperial court or the open office, in ancient Rome or a modern city, operates from the same fears, the same wounds, the same confusion that Marcus Aurelius documented with such precision 2,000 years ago. The behavior has not changed, and neither has the most effective response to it. Part 6. What this means for you, and for the specific person in your life. Who keeps appearing in your mind right now? There is someone. There is always someone. The person whose behavior keeps taking up more mental space than they deserve, whose presence, even when they are not there, still generates anxiety, whose words land differently than other people's words. Marcus Aurelius would start here, not with strategy, with a question. What quality in me is this person targeting? Not to blame yourself, to understand the dynamic, because the quality they target is almost always a strength you have that they cannot access in themselves. Your calm, your honesty, your settled identity, your ability to be present without performing. And that quality, identified, understood, consciously protected, cannot be taken. It can be poked at, it can be tested, it can be temporarily disturbed. But a quality you are consciously cultivating is different from one you simply have and never thought about. The conscious version has roots. Now the 4 steps, starting today: reclassify. They're doing this not to me. Protect the quiet, daily practice of a gap. Respond for values. Does this reflect who I am? Compassion without access. Warmth from distance. These 4 steps do not require that the toxic person change. They do not require that the situation resolves. They require only that you decide, consciously, daily, return to after every failure, to be the person whose quiet cannot be taken. Marcus Aurelius decided that. Every morning, for 20 years, it is available to you today. The Marcus Aurelius complete system on toxic people, who they target. Not the weak, the quiet. Not vulnerability, the strength they cannot access. The 5 types: the power performer, the victim architect, the approval extractor, the chaos architect, the conditional ally. What does not work? Explanation gives them engagement. Pure avoidance transfers the dynamic. Counterattack fights on their terrain. The 4 steps that work: reclassify. They're doing this not to me. Protect the quiet, daily, actively, consciously. Respond from values. Does this reflect who I am? Compassion without access. Warmth from distance. The proof: Marcus Aurelius governed the most toxic social environment available for 20 years and wrote about it and remained himself. That is the standard. Now, before you close this week we covered Seneca on anger, Epictetus on freedom, and today, Marcus Aurelius on the people. Who test both? These are not separate videos. They are one system, Seneca gives you the emotional diagnosis. Epictetus gives you the philosophical foundation. Marcus Aurelius gives you the specific application. Subscribe to this channel right now, because August, starting next week, is where this system goes deeper. More philosophers, more problems, more precise solutions. And you have been here since the beginning. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this video with one person, the person you know who has someone in their life they cannot stop thinking about. This is the video for them. And leave me one comment. Tell me which of the 5 types is the most present in your life right now. I read every single one. Remember to be wise. Memento Sapiens. Trident Temple.